The stars looked different when you knew you didn't belong among them. Captain Haiyan Wu stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Persistence, watching the planet Arcadia 7 rotate slowly below. 32 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and every single day of those years had taught the same lesson. Humans were the new kids, and new kids got pushed around. His ship wasn't much to look at compared to the vessels of older species. The Persistence was a light cruiser, built more for showing the flag than fighting wars. Its weapons were outdated by galactic standards, its shields barely worth mentioning. But it was human, and Haiyan Wu loved it anyway. Down on Arcadia 7, people called the colony New Jeju. 847,000 souls lived there, farming the rich soil and building homes under alien skies. They had left Earth looking for something better, something their own. Haiyan Wu's job was to keep them safe, though he sometimes wondered what he could actually do if real trouble came calling. The door to the bridge slid open, and Lieutenant Sang-hoon entered, carrying a datapad. The young officer's face was troubled, which wasn't unusual these days. Sang-hoon was the tactical officer, which meant he spent his time watching their neighbors and trying not to panic at what he saw. "Captain, you need to see this," Sang-hoon said quietly. Haiyan Wu took the pad and scrolled through the sensor data. Vrethik ships, dozens of them, moving through the border regions. The Vrethik were crystalline beings who looked like walking diamonds and treated biological life the way humans might treat bacteria. To them, flesh and blood species were messy, inefficient, and barely worth noticing. "They're getting closer," Haiyan Wu observed. "Every day, sir. I've logged 17 different incursions in the past month alone." Haiyan Wu handed back the pad. "Send it to Earth. Add it to Ambassador Taeyang's file." Sang-hoon's expression said everything about what he thought of that plan. Ambassador Taeyang had filed complaint after complaint with the Galactic Council. The Council had responded with sympathy, promises, and absolutely nothing useful. They talked about diplomatic channels and proper procedures, while Vrethik warships did whatever they pleased. Down on New Jeju, Jia was having a better day. The colony administrator stood in the central plaza, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on a new school. 15 years she'd been on this world, watching it grow from nothing into something beautiful. Her daughter So-min was already studying at the old academy, but this new building would serve twice as many students. "Mom, can I go to the lake after class?" So-min had asked that morning. "Homework first," Jia had replied, the eternal parent's answer. Normal. Everything was beautifully, wonderfully normal. Jia had left Earth to escape the crowding, the noise, the endless feeling of living in someone else's world. Here, humans could build something their own. Sure, they had to follow Galactic Council regulations, fill out forms for every new structure, pay fees for mining rights on their own planet. But it was still theirs. The communicator on her wrist buzzed. One of the agricultural supervisors wanted to discuss irrigation permits. Jia sighed and headed back to her office. Paperwork was the same everywhere in the galaxy. Apparently, light years away on Earth, Admiral Dayun reviewed the same reports that Sang-hoon had sent. Her office overlooked the Space Command headquarters in Geneva, where the flags of every Earth nation flew side by side. Humanity had unified when the stars opened up, putting aside old divisions to face the galaxy together. Not that it had mattered much. The big three empires ran the council, and they made sure everyone knew it. The Vrethik sovereignty, the Malin collective, and the Thoric ascendancy had been traveling between stars when humans were still banging rocks together. They never let anyone forget it. Dayun touched her screen and opened a communication channel to the president's office. Wu Jin answered immediately, his face tired. The man barely slept these days. "The Vrethik are pushing again," Dayun said without preamble. "I know. Tae-yang called an hour ago. The council postponed his petition for the 4th time. We need to reinforce the border colonies. Wu Jin shook his head. The civilian government won't approve it. They say it would look aggressive, might upset the diplomatic process. What diplomatic process? Dayun couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. We've been diplomatic for 32 years. It gets us sympathy and nothing else. I know, Admiral. I know. Wu Jin rubbed his eyes. But we're not ready for the alternative. Our fleet is a fraction of the Rethic size. We need more time. Time. Always time. Dayun ended the call and stared out at the flags. Humanity had been so proud when the council accepted them. First contact had gone smoothly. The treaties were signed, and Earth joined the galactic community. Then, reality set in. The council preached peace and cooperation, but it was peace enforced by power. Species with strong fleets got respect. Species with weak fleets got lectures about patience. Humans had tried to play by the rules, build influence through diplomacy and trade. It wasn't working. Back on the Persistence, Haiyan Wu walked the corridors of his ship, nodding to crew members as they went about their duties. These were good people, professionals who believed in their mission. They protected Earth's colonies and showed the flag at council events. They did their jobs with pride. But Haiyan Wu had been in space long enough to see the truth. The other species didn't respect the Persistence. When human ships docked at council stations, the alien crews sneered or ignored them entirely. When human officers attended tactical briefings, the older species treated them like students, not equals. He entered the mess hall where off-duty crew members were eating dinner. The conversation stopped when he entered, then resumed. Normal shipboard life. These people trusted him to keep them safe. Haiyan Wu wondered if they understood how little he could actually do against a real threat. On the council homeworld, Ambassador Tae-yang sat in the great chamber where representatives from 100 worlds gathered. He had been there for 6 hours, waiting for his turn to speak. The Vrethic representative, a being that called itself Vextheron, had already addressed the council about minor territorial adjustments. When Tae-yang finally got his chance, he presented evidence of Vrethic violations, ship movements, and threatening behavior. He spoke clearly and followed every rule of council procedure. The other ambassadors listened politely. Then they voted to table the discussion for further study. Tae-yang returned to the human embassy and poured himself a drink. 32 years of this. 32 years of being patted on the head and told to be patient. He sent his daily report to Earth, knowing it would change nothing. On New Jeju, So-min finished her homework and looked out her window at the stars. She wanted to be an explorer someday, to see new worlds and maybe even make first contact with unknown species. Her teachers said she was bright enough, dedicated enough. The galaxy was full of possibilities. Her mother came in to say goodnight. Mom, do you think we'll ever be important? Like the Vrethic or the Malan? Gia smiled and kissed her daughter's forehead. We're already important, sweetheart. We're building something good here. That matters more than warships and power. So-min accepted this with the faith of youth. Her mother had never lied to her before. Neither of them knew that in 3 days, the Vrethic fleet would arrive. Neither of them knew that humanity's age of politeness was about to end in fire and blood. They went to sleep under peaceful stars, in a colony that believed the Galactic Council's promises meant something. They were wrong. The alarm started screaming at 0614 station time. Haiyan Wu was in his quarters when the ship's computer announced incoming warp signatures. 23 of them. His blood went cold before his mind even processed the numbers. 23 was a battle fleet, not a patrol. He was running for the bridge before the second alarm sounded. Sang-hoon was already at his station, hands flying across the controls. The main screen showed what the sensors were detecting. Rethic warships, massive crystalline vessels that gleamed like deadly jewels against the black. They emerged from warp space in perfect formation, and they were close. Too close. "Hail them," Hyan-Wu ordered, sliding into his command chair. "Open all channels." The communications officer tried. No response. The Rethic ships simply hung in space above Arcadia 7, their weapons charging. Hyan-Wu watched the energy reading spike and felt his stomach drop. "They're targeting the surface," Sang-Hun said, his voice cracking slightly. "Multiple locks. Captain, they're gonna bombard the colony." On New Jeju, Jia was having coffee when her terminal exploded with warnings. Every emergency system in the colony activated at once, painting her screens red with danger alerts. She stared at the orbital scan for one frozen second, not believing what she was seeing. Then training took over. She slammed her hand down on the colony-wide alert. "This is Administrator Jia. Emergency Protocol 7. All civilians to the shelters immediately. This is not a drill. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Her voice echoed across every speaker in the colony. People stopped what they were doing, their faces going pale. Emergency Protocol 7 meant orbital bombardment. It meant the sky was about to fall. G- was already running. So-Min was at the academy, 3 kilometers away. She had 4 minutes, maybe less. Parents across the colony were having the same terrible calculation, the same desperate race. At the academy, So-Min heard her mother's voice over the speakers and didn't hesitate. She'd practiced these drills her whole life. She grabbed the 2 students nearest to her, both younger kids who looked frozen in fear. "Come on," she told them firmly. "Follow me." The shelter entrance was behind the building. So-Min ran, making sure the younger children kept up. Other students streamed from classrooms, teachers shouting directions. The sky above them was still blue and peaceful. It wouldn't be for long. Hyan-Wu brought the Persistence around, putting his ship between the Rethic fleet and the planet. It was meaningless, one light cruiser against 23 warships, but he couldn't just watch. "Broadcast to all human channels," he ordered. "Tell them New Jeju is under attack. Tell Earth we need help now." "Sir, reinforcements are 6 days away at best," the communications officer said quietly. "I know. Send it anyway." The first Rethic ship fired. A beam of concentrated energy lanced down through the atmosphere, and where it touched, the city of Landing Bay simply ceased to exist. 170,000 people lived in Landing Bay. The beam lasted 3 seconds. Hyan-Wu heard someone on his bridge start crying. He forced himself to keep watching. 2 more beams fired. The agricultural center at New Seoul vanished. The mining complex at Hanbit disappeared. "Return fire," Hyan-Wu said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, too calm. "Target the nearest destroyer. All weapons." The Persistence was outgunned, but it wasn't helpless. Its missiles streaked toward a Rethic ship, and Sang-Hun's targeting was perfect. The warhead slammed into crystalline shields, and for a moment, the shields flickered. The Rethic fleet responded. 5 ships turned their attention from the planet to the Persistence. Energy beams tore into human shields, overloading them instantly. The ship bucked and screamed. Hull breaches on 3 decks. Main power failing. Gravity fluctuating wildly. "Abandon ship," Hyan-Wu ordered. "All hands to escape pods." "Captain, you need to get to a pod," Sang-Hun said. "After everyone else?" "That's an order, Lieutenant." On the surface, Jia reached the academy shelter just as the ground shook. The bombardment had started in earnest. She fought through panicked crowds, screaming her daughter's name. Someone grabbed her arm. "Mom." So-Min was there, dirty and scared but alive. Jia pulled her daughter into the shelter, and the massive doors sealed behind them. Inside, 300 people huddled together in the dark. The shelter's screens showed what was happening above. City after city deleted from existence. The bombardment was systematic, methodical. The Vrethik were being thorough. I held so men and watched their world die. The shelter shook constantly. Dust fell from the ceiling. A young boy asked his father if they were safe. The father lied and said yes. 6 hours. The Vrethik bombarded New Jeju for 6 hours. They reduced cities to glass, vaporized forests, and boiled lakes into steam. They targeted population centers with precision. Military efficiency applied to mass murder. When it finally stopped, the silence was worse than the noise. Haiyan Wu was still on the persistence, though barely. The bridge was exposed to vacuum, kept pressurized only by emergency force fields that flickered dangerously. Most of his crew had made it to escape pods. Sang-hoon had refused to leave, staying at his station even when half the bridge crew were dead. Life support was failing. Haiyan Wu activated the ship's final transmission beacon, using the last of their power. He spoke into the recorder, his breath fogging in the rapidly cooling air. "This is Captain Haiyan Wu of the UES Persistence. New Jeju has fallen. 731,000 confirmed dead. The Vrethik came without warning, without demands, without mercy. They murdered our people because they could. Because the Galactic Council lets them. Because we're too weak to stop them." He coughed, the air getting thin. "They will answer for this. Someone will make them answer." The transmission cut out as the ship lost power completely. 2 days later, human relief ships arrived to find a graveyard. New Jeju was a charred wasteland. The scans showed scattered pockets of survivors in shelters, but most of the colony was gone. Admiral De Yoon led the rescue fleet personally. She stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched recovery teams pull survivors from the ruins. Each shuttle that returned brought more horror stories, more bodies, more children who would never see their parents again. And so men were among the survivors. They emerged from their shelter into a world they didn't recognize. The sky was gray with ash. The city was gone. Everything was gone. A Marine helped them to a shuttle. Jia looked back at what had been her home for 15 years and felt something break inside her. Not her spirit, that remained, but her faith in the galactic order. Her belief that civilization meant something, that justice existed, that goodness mattered. All of that died in the ruins of New Jeju. The survivors were taken to hospital ships. Medical teams worked around the clock, treating injuries and shock. But the worst wounds weren't physical. In every survivor's eyes was the same question: why? On Earth, the footage started arriving. News networks played the recordings from New Jeju satellites, showing the bombardment in detail. Humanity watched their people die, watched cities burn, watched the Vrethik fleet withdraw as casually as they'd arrived. President Wu Jin called an emergency session of the Earth government. Ambassador Taeyang demanded an immediate council meeting. The demand was granted because even the council couldn't ignore this. Taeyang stood before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds and presented the evidence. He showed the death toll, the footage, the sensor logs. He demanded justice. He demanded sanctions. He demanded the Vrethik be held accountable. The Vrethik representative, Bextheron, listened with what might have been amusement. When it was his turn to speak, he was brief. The colony existed in disputed territory. The sovereignty acted within its rights. This matter is closed. The council voted. 47 members called for an investigation. 52 voted to accept the Vrethik explanation. One species, one vote, and humanity had one vote. Taeyang sat down slowly. Around him, sympathetic ambassadors offered condolences. They were very sorry. These things were tragic. Perhaps humans should be more careful about where they place colonies in the future. He transmitted his report to Earth and then resigned. 32 years he believed in this system. He couldn't anymore. On the hospital ships, Jia held her daughter and made a promise. So Min was alive, but thousands of her classmates weren't. Thousands of children who have futures and dreams and plans were ash now. They'll pay, Jia whispered. Somehow they'll pay for this. She didn't know how. Humans were weak, divided, unprepared for war. But she knew, with absolute certainty, that this couldn't stand. Wouldn't stand. In a military hospital, Hyun-woo woke up 3 days after the attack. Sang-hoon was there, arm in a cast but alive. The young officer told him the numbers. 731,000 dead. 116,000 survivors. Hyun-woo closed his eyes and saw the bombardment again. Saw his weapons do nothing. Saw his ship die while the colony burned. What happens now? Sang-hoon asked quietly. Hyun-woo didn't answer. But something in his eyes had changed, something hard and cold. The captain who'd believed in duty and following orders was gone. What remained was something angrier. Across Earth and all its colonies, 8 billion humans were asking the same question. What happens now? The answer would reshape the galaxy. President Woo Jin stood before the United Earth Assembly, and the chamber was absolutely silent. Every seat was filled. Every screen across human space was tuned in. The speech had been announced 3 days ago, and everyone knew it would change everything. He looked tired. The past week had aged him 10 years. But his voice was steady when he spoke. For 32 years, we have followed your laws. He stared directly at the camera, speaking to the galaxy beyond. We bent to your customs. We swallowed our pride in the name of peace. We believed in the Galactic Council's promise of justice and order. He paused, letting the words settle. That belief died with 731,000 of our people on New Jeju. It died when we watched our children burn while the Council did nothing. It died when the Vrethik walked away unpunished and the galaxy told us to be more careful next time. The assembly erupted in applause. Woo Jin waited for silence. Humanity is done being polite. We withdraw our ambassador from the Council. We recall all human personnel from Council facilities. We will no longer beg for justice. We will make our own. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, alien species watched and wondered if this was a threat or just grief talking. The Vrethik dismissed it as emotional posturing. They would regret that mistake. Admiral Daeun received her orders an hour after the speech. She read them twice to make sure she understood correctly. Unlimited authority to expand the fleet. No budget restrictions. No political oversight. Build whatever was needed to ensure New Jeju never happened again. She called her staff together and showed them the directive. Her chief of engineering, a woman named Hyjin, actually laughed in disbelief. They're giving us everything we've been asking for, Hyjin said. For 30 years we've been begging for cruiser upgrades and getting denied. Now we can build anything? Anything, Daeun confirmed. The civilian government is stepping aside. Earth is mobilizing for war. The word hung in the air, war. Not peacekeeping missions or border patrols. Actual war against an empire that had been conquering worlds. When humanity was still in caves, Daeun opened another file and put it on the main screen. Ship designs. Lots of them. These weren't exploration vessels or light patrol craft. These were warships, pure and simple. Heavy armor. Powerful weapons. Ships designed to fight and win. Start with these, she said, and then show me what else is possible. In a research facility deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Young-soo was having the best and worst week of his life. Best because the government had just unlocked every theoretical weapons project he'd ever proposed. Worst because he knew why. He stood in his laboratory, surrounded by prototypes and blueprints. His team was already working around the clock, turning theory into reality. The Railgun project alone would have been career-defining under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. The prototype is ready for testing, his assistant J1 said. Young-Soo followed him to the testing range. The railgun looked brutal, a long barrel designed to throw projectiles at ridiculous speeds. No energy beams or fancy technology. Just kinetic force applied with extreme prejudice. They fired the test shot. The projectile hit the target at a significant fraction of light speed. The target vaporized. So did the mountain behind it. Increase production, Young-Soo ordered. I want these on every ship we build. J1 hesitated. Sir, the Council treaties forbid relativistic kinetic weapons. They're classified as barbaric. Young-Soo looked at his assistant coldly. The Council lets 700,000 of our people die. I don't care what they classify as barbaric anymore. Captain Hyun-woo stood in the shipyard, looking up at his new command. The Yu's reckoning was nothing like the Persistence. Where his old ship had been sleek and optimistic, the reckoning was blunt and aggressive. A dreadnought built from the ground up to kill. They promoted him to Commodore and given him a fleet. 8 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 30 support craft. All new builds, all fitted with the latest human technology. It was more firepower than humanity had possessed in its entire navy 6 months ago. Sang-hoon was his tactical officer again, promoted to commander. The young man had changed too, lost the uncertainty he'd carried before. War did that to people. Refined them or broke them. She's beautiful, sir, Sang-hoon said, looking up at the reckoning. She's a weapon, Hyun-woo corrected. Nothing more, nothing less. The Council wants to play power politics? Let's show them what power looks like. Across human space, the transformation was total. Civilian factories retooled for military production. Shipyards that had built colony vessels started building warships. Research centers that had focused on terraforming turned to weapons development, and people volunteered. Millions of them. Corporal Minna stood in line at a recruitment center with hundreds of others. She'd been a teacher before New Jeju. Now she was joining the Retribution Course, a new military branch designed for one purpose, making the Vrethik pay. The recruiter looked at her application and raised an eyebrow. You understand this isn't peacekeeping? This is combat. Real combat. I understand, Minna said firmly. My sister died on New Jeju. She was 9 years old. So yes, I understand exactly what I'm signing up for. The recruiter approved her application. Training was brutal. The Corps wasn't interested in parade ground soldiers. They wanted fighters, people who could operate in the vacuum, board enemy ships, and show no mercy. Minna threw herself into it, turning grief into strength. On one of the hospital ships, Jia had become something she never expected, a voice for the survivors. News crews wanted to interview her, and she'd said yes. Someone had to make sure Earth never forgot. They came without warning, she told the cameras. My daughter and I watched our world burn. We listened to people die in shelters that couldn't withstand the bombardment. We lost everything. She looked directly at the camera. Don't let politicians tell you this was just a tragedy. Don't let them say we need patience. 700,000 people deserve justice, and if the Council won't give it to us, then we'll take it ourselves. The interview was broadcast across Earth and all its colonies. Jia became a symbol, the face of human anger. Some people criticized her, saying revenge wasn't the answer. Most people agreed with every word. So Min watched her mother's interviews and felt proud. She'd lost her home, her friends, her childhood in one terrible day. but her mother was fighting back in her own way. So Min decided she would too. "I'm applying to the Space Command Academy," she told Jia one night. G looked at her daughter, seeing the determination there. She wanted to say no, to keep So-min safe. But safe didn't exist anymore. The Vrethik had proven that. "Then we'll get you ready," Jia said instead, on the Galactic Council homeworld. Ambassador Kron of the Malin Collective watched the human transformation with growing concern. The Malin were old, wise, and cautious. They'd seen empires rise and fall, and they recognized the signs. He requested a meeting with the council leadership and presented his analysis. "Humanity is militarizing at an unprecedented rate," he told them. "Their industrial capacity is being redirected entirely to war production. They're not bluffing about this." The Thoric representative dismissed his concerns. "They're one species against an empire. The Vrethik will crush them." "Perhaps," Kron said carefully, "but consider the cost. Humans fight differently than council species. They don't follow our rules of civilized warfare. They're angry, they're unified, and they have nothing left to lose." The Vrethik representative, Vex Theron, made a sound like crystals grinding. "If humans wish to commit suicide against the sovereignty, that is their choice." Kron filed his report and returned to the Malin embassy. He'd warned them. What happened next wasn't his responsibility. 6 months after New Jeju, the first new human fleet was commissioned. Admiral Dayun reviewed the ships from her flagship and felt a grim satisfaction. 73 warships, all state-of-the-art, all crewed by people who had volunteered specifically to fight the Vrethik. Earth had other fleets defending the home system, protecting colonies, patrolling borders. But this fleet had one mission: make the Vrethik hurt. Commodore Hyam Woo was given operational command. He gathered his captains for a briefing, looking at faces that ranged from veterans to young officers who'd never seen combat. They were all volunteers. They all knew what was coming. "We're not the bigger force," he told them bluntly. "We're not the more experienced force, but we're the angrier force. We're fighting for 700,000 people who can't fight for themselves. Make every shot count. Make every decision matter. And remember what we're here to do." The captains saluted and returned to their ships. On Earth, President Wu Jing met with his military council. The plan was ready. Intelligence had identified the target. The fleet was prepared. "Are we sure about this?" His chief of staff asked quietly. "Once we attack, there's no going back. The Vrethik will respond. This could mean a war we can't win." Wu Jin thought about the footage from New Jeju, thought about children dying in shelters, thought about the council's smug dismissal of human grief. "We're already in a war we can't win," he said. "The only question is whether we fight it on our knees or on our feet. Give Admiral Dayun the order. It's time to stop being victims." The order went out across secure channels. The fleet began preparations to move. In training facilities, soldiers like Minna prepared the Vrethik mining colony of Dex-9 was a fortress. 3 orbital platforms bristled with weapons. Fighter patrols ran constantly. Shields capable of withstanding sustained bombardment protected the surface installations. The sovereignty had built it to be impregnable, and for good reason. Dex-9 supplied the rare elements needed for Vrethik crystalline technology. Without it, their entire fleet would slowly degrade. It was also 300 light-years deep into Vrethik space, far from human territory. The perfect target precisely because it seemed impossible to reach. Commodore Hyun Woo stood on the bridge of the reckoning, watching his fleet emerge from warp space. 30 ships appeared simultaneously, already in attack formation. The element of surprise was everything. "Target locks acquired," Commander Sang-hoon reported calmly. "All ships report ready. Release the drones," Hyun Woo ordered. From each human ship, clouds of small craft deployed. Thousands of them, AI-controlled and moving with precision no living pilot could match. The Galactic Council had banned military AI decades ago, calling it too dangerous. Humans had decided the Council's opinion no longer mattered. The drones swarmed toward Dex-9's defenses like angry hornets. Rethic point defense systems opened fire, destroying dozens of drones. But for every one killed, 10 more slipped through. They crashed into shield generators, detonating with carefully calculated force. Lieutenant Baora, the Reckoning's tactical officer, watched her screens with satisfaction. She'd programmed these attack patterns herself, studying Rethic defensive doctrine and finding its weaknesses. The drones weren't trying to destroy the platforms, just overwhelm them. Shields fluctuating on Platform 2, she reported. Opening in Sector 7. Railgun batteries fire, Haiyan Wu commanded. The Reckoning shuddered as its main guns fired. Solid projectiles, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, streaked across space. No energy signatures to track, no warning. Just kinetic death moving too fast to intercept. The first projectile hit Platform 2 squarely. The impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The platform's structure couldn't handle it. Metal vaporized, atmosphere explosively decompressed, and the entire installation broke apart. Platform 2 destroyed, Sang-hoon confirmed. Platform 1 is launching fighters. Let them come, Haiyan Wu said. All ships, continue bombardment. Bah, how long until we can target the surface? 2 minutes, sir. Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Rethic fighters engaged the human fleet, their crystalline hulls refracting energy weapons in beautiful, deadly patterns. But human point defense was ready, filling space with railgun rounds. The fighters were fast, but they couldn't dodge solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. The orbital platforms fell one by one. When the last one exploded, the path to the surface was clear. Haiyan Wu opened a broadcast on all frequencies. Attention Dex-9. This is Commodore Haiyan Wu of the United Earth Space Command. You have 1 hour to evacuate this facility. Transport every civilian to the designated safe zones. After 1 hour, we will destroy everything that remains. Silence on the Vredic channels. Then, slowly, evacuation transports began launching from the surface. Haiyan Wu monitored them carefully, making sure they weren't trying to sneak weapons platforms or fighters into the evacuation. They weren't. The Vrethic were actually evacuating. Sir, why are we giving them time? A young ensign asked. They didn't give our people any warning. Haiyan Wu looked at the officer. Because we're not them. We're here to destroy their ability to make war, not murder civilians. If we become what they are, then the Jeju died for nothing. The hour passed. Scans confirmed the surface facilities were empty, except for automated systems. Haiyan Wu gave the order, and the fleet opened fire. Railguns pulverized mining equipment. Missiles collapsed tunnel entrances. Precision strikes destroyed refineries and processing plants. When they finished, Dex-9 was useless as a mining colony. It would take the Vrethic years to rebuild. All ships, form up, Haiyan Wu ordered. We're leaving before reinforcements arrive. The fleet jumped to warp, leaving behind a crippled facility and a message. Humans could strike anywhere. Anytime. News of the attack spread across the galaxy faster than the human fleet could travel. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, the chamber buzzing with shock and speculation. The Vrethic demanded immediate sanctions against humanity. The Thoric Ascendancy called for a full investigation. The Malin Collective said nothing, but Ambassador Corun looked distinctly UNSURPRICD. What shocked the Council most wasn't the attack itself, but how it happened. Human ships had penetrated deep into Vrethic space undetected. Human weapons had overwhelmed defenses designed to stop Council standard armaments. Human tactics had been efficient, brutal, and totally unlike the civilized warfare the Council practiced. The Vrethik mobilized their fleet. 100 warships, the pride of the sovereignty, prepared to hunt down and destroy the human raiders. Fleet Commander Kelnthrix personally took command, vowing to make an example of the upstart species, but the humans weren't where he expected. While Kelnthrix was searching the border regions, Commodore Haiyan Wu hit a supply depot in a different sector, then a communications relay, then a fleet staging area. Each time, the pattern was the same: appear from nowhere, devastate the target, evacuate civilians, destroy infrastructure, and vanish before Vrethik reinforcements arrived. The Vrethik fleet was larger and more powerful, but it was designed to fight pitched battles, not chase ghosts. Human ships used hit-and-run tactics, refusing to engage unless they had overwhelming local superiority. They mined warp lanes with devices that wouldn't kill ships but would damage them badly enough to require repairs. They hacked into Vrethik communication networks and fed false information. It was guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale, and the Vrethik had no counter for it. On Earth, Dr. Youngsu was working on his most controversial project. The harmonic disruptor was designed specifically to target Vrethik biology. Their crystalline structures resonated at specific frequencies. Youngsu's weapon would exploit that, inducing catastrophic structural failure. "This is a war crime by Council standards," J1 said quietly, looking at the specifications. "The Council doesn't get to decide our standards anymore," Youngsu replied. "They made that clear at New Jeju. Besides, this is less cruel than what they did to our people. At least it's quick." The first disruptors were deployed to the fleet 3 months into the campaign. The results were devastating. Vrethik boarding parties found themselves facing weapons that ignored their natural armor, shattering them from the inside out. It was effective and terrifying in equal measure. Corporal Minna and her squad were among the first to use the new weapons. They boarded a damaged Vrethik destroyer, fighting through corridors designed for beings twice their size. When Vrethik soldiers tried to stop them, Minna activated her disruptor. The sound was horrible, like breaking glass magnified 1,000 times. The Vrethik warrior shattered into fragments. Minna's squad secured the ship's data core and planted demolition charges. Another Vrethik vessel destroyed, another small victory. She thought about her 9-year-old sister and felt no guilt. This was justice, not murder. The Vrethik had started this war. Humans were just finishing it. The Galactic Council tried to intervene. They sent diplomatic missions to both sides, offering to mediate. The Vrethik ignored them, too proud to negotiate with humans. President Wu Jin's response was more direct. He appeared via hologram at a council session, the first human communication with the council since Earth withdrew. "You invited humanity to speak?" he said calmly. "Very well. Here is what we have to say. You had your chance for diplomacy. You chose politics over justice. You chose comfort over duty. 700,000 humans died, and you did nothing." He paused, letting every word land. "We'll take justice instead. This war ends when the Vrethik surrender and pay reparations for New Jeju. Until then, we will continue to dismantle their empire piece by piece. And if the Council interferes, we'll remember who our friends were and who stood aside while our children burned." The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some species called for military intervention against humanity. Others pointed out that intervening would mean war with an enemy that had just proven it could strike anywhere. The council had no consensus, so it did what it did best. Nothing. As months passed, the tide of war became clear. The Vrethik weren't losing exactly, but they weren't winning either. Every week brought news of another facility destroyed, another fleet element damaged, another strategic asset compromised. Human casualties were relatively light because humans refused to fight fair. They used stealth, deception, and weapons the Council had banned generations ago. On the reckoning, Haiyan Wu received intelligence reports showing the Vrethic economy was straining. War was expensive, and humans were making it more expensive every day. Replacement parts for damaged ships were scarce. Morale in the Vrethic military was declining. Some sovereign territories were questioning whether the war was worth the cost. "We're winning," Commander Sang-hoon said, reviewing the data. "We're surviving," Haiyan Wu corrected. "There's a difference. We can't sustain this forever either. Eventually, they'll add fair equipment." In 14 months after New Jeju burned, Admiral Daeun sat across a negotiating table from Fleet Commander Calnthrix. The meeting took place on a neutral Thoric vessel, surrounded by enough security to invade a small planet. Neither side trusted the other, but both were finally ready to talk. Calnthrix was a massive crystalline being, facets reflecting light in patterns that supposedly indicated emotion. Daeun couldn't read them and didn't care to learn. She'd spent the past year making the Vrethic hurt. Now she would make them pay. "The sovereignty is prepared to offer a ceasefire," Calnthrix began, his translated voice resonating through the chamber. "Both sides withdraw to pre-war positions. We acknowledge the regrettable incident at New Jeju and offer compensation for damages." Daeun didn't react to the word incident. She'd expected this. "No," Calnthrix's facets shifted. "You refuse peace?" "I refuse surrender dressed up as peace," Daeun corrected. She activated a holographic display. "These are our terms. Recognition of human sovereignty over all current territories. Reparations totaling 3 trillion credits for New Jeju. A demilitarized zone 50 light-years wide between our borders. And formal acknowledgement that the attack on New Jeju was an act of unprovoked aggression." "Impossible," Calnthrix said flatly. "The sovereignty does not pay reparations to lesser species." Daeun smiled without humor. "Then we continue the war. And in case you're wondering if we can sustain it, let me show you something." She pulled up another display. Ship construction data. In the 14 months since New Jeju, Earth had built 73 new warships. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers. The numbers kept climbing. "Our industrial capacity is barely tapped," she said. "We've converted maybe 30% of our civilian manufacturing. We can go higher. We've got volunteers lining up faster than we can train them. Our weapons technology improves every month. And most importantly, we're not tired of this war yet." She leaned forward. "You want to know what keeps me up at night, Commander? It's not losing. It's the math. Right now, we have rough parity in active ships in this sector. In 6 months, we'll have numerical superiority. In a year, we'll outnumber you 2-to-1. In 2 years, we'll have the industrial capacity to build ships faster than you can destroy them." Calnthrix was silent. Daeun pressed her advantage. "This war is costing you more than it's costing us. We're fighting for survival. You're fighting for pride. Economics always wins in the end. The question is how much more you want to bleed before admitting the obvious." The meeting adjourned without agreement. Calnthrix returned to the Vrethic High Command with Daeun's projections. They ran their own analysis and reached the same conclusion. The humans were right. The war was unsustainable, but pride was a powerful force. The Vrethic High Command debated for 3 days before reaching a decision. They would offer better terms, but they would not apologize. The sovereignty had never apologized to anyone. On Earth, President Wu Jin had been replaced by President Min Yong in a scheduled election. The campaign had barely mattered. Both candidates supported the war effort. The only question was how aggressively to prosecute it. Min Yong was reviewing casualty reports. when the Vrethik counteroffer arrived. Better compensation, clearer borders, but still no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. She forwarded it to Admiral Dayun with a simple note, "Your call." Dayun considered rejecting it outright. But she thought about the human casualties, small compared to Vrethik losses, but still real people. She thought about the resources being poured into warship production that could go to rebuilding colonies. She thought about the risk that the Vrethik might get desperate and do something catastrophic. She called Commodore Hyan Wu for advice. He was still on the reckoning, preparing for another raid. "What do you think?" she asked. Hyan Wu was quiet for a moment. "I think about New Jeju every day. I think about the people I couldn't save. Part of me wants to keep fighting until the Vrethik sovereignty is dust. But So-min, Jia's daughter, she's at the academy now. 16 years old and training to fight a war that might not need to be fought. If we can get justice without her having to bleed for it, maybe that's enough." Dayun made her decision. She sent a counter-proposal to the Vrethik. Everything from her original terms with one modification. They didn't need an apology in words. They needed it in actions. The Vrethik would fund the complete reconstruction of New Jeju and erect a memorial to the dead. The memorial's inscription would list the exact death toll and describe the attack accurately. No euphemisms, no political language. Just truth. Kelthrix brought this to his superiors and was surprised when they agreed. Pride was important, but survival was more important. If humans wanted a memorial, they could have their memorial. The treaty was signed on what would have been New Jeju's anniversary. Jia was present as a representative of the survivors. She stood beside President Minyoung and Admiral Dayun as the final documents were sealed. The Vrethik delegation was led by Kelthrix himself. He approached Jia after the ceremony. "You have your justice," he said through his translator. G-Ah looked at the crystalline being who represented the empire that had murdered her neighbors. "No, we have peace. Justice would be bringing back the dead. But this will do." The reconstruction of New Jeju began immediately. Human and Vrethik engineers worked side by side, an arrangement both species found awkward. But the treaty required it, and both sides honored their agreements. The memorial was completed first. It stood in what had been the central plaza, a massive structure listing every name of the dead. 731,000 names. The inscription read, "On this day, the Vrethik sovereignty attacked this colony without warning or provocation. These citizens of Earth died in defense of their home. They will not be forgotten. They will not be unavenged." Jia stood at the memorial's dedication with So-min beside her. Her daughter was taller now, wearing the cadet uniform of the Space Command Academy. She would graduate in 2 years and join the fleet that had made the Vrethik back down. "Is this enough?" So-min asked quietly. "All those names, all those people. Is a piece of stone enough?" "No," Jia said. "But it's what we have. And it's more than the Council would have given us." The galaxy watched the peace treaty with mixed feelings. Some species celebrated, relieved that the war hadn't escalated further. Others worried about the precedent. Humans had challenged a major power and won concessions through military force. That wasn't how the council system was supposed to work. Ambassador Quran of the Malin Collective submitted a report to his government analyzing the situation. His conclusion was stark. The galactic balance of power had shifted. Humanity wasn't the client species anymore. They were a force to be reckoned with. Several smaller species that had endured similar treatment from the Council's major powers took notice. If humans could stand up to the Vrethik, maybe others could stand up to their oppressors too. The Galactic Council tried to reassert control, calling for new regulations on warfare and weapons development. President Minyoung's response was delivered personally to the council chamber. Humanity will follow galactic law when galactic law applies equally to everyone, she said. When the Vrethik attacked New Jeju, you did nothing. When we defended ourselves, you called us barbaric. You can't have it both ways. Either enforce your laws fairly, or admit they're just suggestions for those without the strength to ignore them. She didn't wait for a response. Earth had said what it needed to say. 5 years after the massacre, New Jeju was thriving again. The population had grown to 500,000, with more arriving every month. The colony looked different now. Alongside the civilian structures were defensive platforms, shield generators, and a permanent military garrison. New Jeju would never be defenseless again. Commodore Hyan-woo had become Admiral Hyan-woo, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. The Reckoning was his flagship still, now accompanied by 200 other warships. He spent his time ensuring no human colony would ever burn the way New Jeju had. Dr. Young-Soo's weapons. Research had been curtailed slightly after the peace treaty, but not stopped. Earth maintained an active development program, always staying ahead of potential threats. The lesson of New Jeju was clear. Safety came from strength, not from trusting others to protect you. Corporal Minna had been promoted to sergeant. She trained new Marines, teaching them the tactics that had worked against the Vrethik. Her lessons always started the same way. We fight smart, we fight hard, and we never assume the enemy will play fair. New Jeju proved that. On the Space Command Academy, So-min excelled in her studies. She specialized in tactical operations, learning from officers who had fought in the war. Her instructors said she had a gift for unconventional thinking, for seeing solutions others missed. She planned to serve on a frontier patrol after graduation. Protecting the colony's G- remained on New Jeju, running the rebuilt colony. She'd been offered positions on Earth, prestigious jobs in the government or military. She'd declined them all. Her place was here, making sure the memorials stayed maintained and the colony stayed strong. Sometimes she would stand at the memorial at night, reading names she recognized. Neighbors, friends, people she'd worked with for years. The weight of those losses never fully left her, but neither did the pride. They'd stood up when the galaxy